This episode is brought to you from the salesman.org HubSpot studio. Welcome to the Social Selling Show with myself, Will Barron, founder of salesman.org, and Daniel Disney, the king of social selling. Daniel, how's it going, mate?
All is going very well. Will, busy as ever. But as always, excited for today's topic, which I'll let you tee up. But today's a good one, a really important one. I think it's one of the biggest questions I get from sales leaders, salespeople around how do you measure it? And, what activities, how much time, where are the metrics? So excited for today's subject. I think it's probably going to be one of the more popular ones we cover.
Sure. So we're going to cover how you measure social selling and how you measure your success, how you measure the time that you're spending doing it. And you think you're right, Daniel, in the way that you teed this up, in that there is leadership who want to know that they're getting good ROI on essentially the spend on employees of the salary, whether it's more efficient to use social selling, even if it works or if it doesn't, assuming it works. And then, or if it's more efficient to just have someone hounding a phone, even though it's perhaps a less likely, less enjoyable job, which one's more efficient? And then it goes down to individual salespeople as well, because we'll touch on it in a second, perhaps. I've got a feeling that salespeople who are social selling think that they're spending perhaps an hour or so, which I think you've recommended in the past, Daniel, on LinkedIn, creating content, connecting, driving lead generation opportunities. They might be spending a whole lot more time on there by the time you open your phone, check your notifications at 9 o'clock before you go to bed, because we're all addicted to that notification bell. So with that, we're going to cover measuring social selling. And Daniel, is the place to start with all of this LinkedIn's own social selling index score? Is this the holy grail of measuring our efficiency or our ability to get deals done on social media?
It's not, Will, unfortunately. It is really good, by the way. I would say it represents about half of the picture. So I recommend companies and salespeople definitely utilize it, but it is not the key metric. Unfortunately, the reality is it doesn't measure real social selling success. It won't tell you how much revenue you've earned that month, quarter, or year from LinkedIn. It won't tell you how many pipeline opportunities you created on LinkedIn. It won't tell you how many tangible conversations you've had with prospects, which carry the bigger weight when it comes to sales. It's the same principle. And unfortunately, a lot of sales leaders fall into this of saying, right, you need to make 200 calls a day. Yeah. Okay, if you tell me to make 200 calls today, I'll make 200 calls today. If you tell me to have 20 conversations today, I'll go out and have 20 conversations. The SSI is an activity-based measurement, not a results-based measurement. So yes, SSI is really good, but I would recommend starting with the core results that you want your salespeople to achieve, which hopefully are going to be sales, pipeline, and conversations.
Can we break up this idea of causation and correlation here by, if you've got an answer to this question, and this is somewhat anecdotal as well. We don't have, you probably don't have thousands of data points on this, but are the people who have low SSI scores who crush it on social media and social selling, or does everyone who crushes it on social media, LinkedIn, social selling, do they all have high SSI scores?
There is a correlation, 100%, but there are, unfortunately, examples of people that do have low SSI scores that are crushing it on LinkedIn. And I've seen many people post their SSI scores, but when you look at their audience size, their engagement, their personal brand, and the opportunities they're generating from it, there isn't that sort of direct correlation. So most of the time, the majority of the time, yes, there is a correlation. The activities that you need to hit to have a good SSI score will, if done right, feed into success outside of the SSI score through your opportunities and revenue, etc. So there is a correlation, which is why I recommend tracking them both. Track your SSI score, but then also through your CRM or through spreadsheet or however you want to measure it, track the more tangible results as well.
And for sure, someone who's unfamiliar with SSI, where can we find it on LinkedIn?
Yeah, so if you just Google LinkedIn SSI or Social Selling Index, it will give you a link. It's a feature of Sales Navigator. So if you have Sales Navigator, you'll be able to access it through your dashboard. But if you don't, it's free to get. So even if you're not paying for the premium monthly subscription, you can just Google it, find the link. It's directly through LinkedIn. It will either take you through to your profile or to the login page, and it will give you your score straight away. So it is easy, it is free. And yeah, once you've got that link, you can just check it daily, weekly, monthly.
Sure. And I should probably say, I over explain this, but I feel like I've got to do it. The not sponsoring this episode, but Sales Navigator is sponsoring loads of salesman.org podcast content at the moment. Just so this is Daniel's unbiased view on kind of the fact that the product's there, and we're just mentioning. Just I always trying to over-explain these, but no one's ever complained of the fact that I'm some kind of LinkedIn shill or HubSpot shill just promoting these products. But I thought I'd just drop that in there. Okay, so talking about tools, software, is there any all-in-one solution, Daniel? Is there anything that I could just click, buy, set up with my sales team, or set up with my own personal LinkedIn account, and it just tracks everything that I'm doing, tells me my ROI, integrates with the CRM, pulls in revenue numbers from there, and does all of this calculation on whether social selling is worth it for me, does it all for me? Is there any one-stop solution for this?
I would love to say there is, Will, but unfortunately there isn't. And the main reason being LinkedIn is very sort of closed with its data, with its API, everything. It doesn't give it out. Shield app, which we've mentioned in one of our previous episodes, is one of very few sort of external pieces of software that has been able to pull in sort of additional analytics from LinkedIn, but it is minimal. So yeah, unfortunately there isn't. I live in hope for two things, Will. One, that I'm able to build that solution, because that would be the biggest thing to complement my mission to help with social selling. But two, if LinkedIn or Microsoft were to build something, which would make even more sense and be significantly easier for them with the resources they have, I hope potentially it would be something that would start off as an integration between Microsoft Dynamics, would be the logical thing to integrate with the CRM, LinkedIn, to build that solution. And then over a period of time, they extend it to other CRMs as well. I hope that's what they're building secretly in the underground LinkedIn research development bunker. We'll have to wait and see. But as it stands, nothing's available.
For sure. I've had some, we'll talk about it off, if you like, after the show. I've had some off-the-record conversations with the guys over at Dynamics at Microsoft, because they want to sponsor some of our content, but they can't because HubSpot sponsored it all. So we had some interesting conversations and back and forths. Stuff like what you're describing here may be coming, Daniel. Let's leave it at that. It is we've talked about it on the social selling show in the past as well. Clearly a massive acquisition for Microsoft LinkedIn. They've done basically nothing with it seemingly so far on the surface, but there's lots of stuff going on behind the scenes. And clearly the push of Dynamics CRM is so important for Microsoft in their mix of Office 365 and going to the cloud with all of these different apps and software products, that it obviously it's coming, and off the record conversations would kind of push me to conclude that maybe some of this is going to happen in the not too distant future as well. So with that said then, how do we track what the heck we're doing on social media and LinkedIn specifically? Is there any way to track time, and then we can, I guess, track time spent on the platform, and then we can go and do our own reports on leads generated from our CRM data? If we had to sell this to our sales manager, or I want to spend an hour a day doing this, and it leads to this ROI, how would we go about doing that?
Yeah, the key thing, Will, is to track it very similarly to your track other sales activities. So what you want to do is, and any sales manager, this is where it's tricky, because sales managers won't have that experience behind them to say you need to make 200 calls, to have 20 conversations, to create 5 opportunities, to hit your target by the end of the month. Sales managers have that experience on the phone. They don't have it. Most don't have it with LinkedIn. Yeah. So you kind of need to almost create it as you go, and just start off by measuring how many conversations they're having, how much content they're putting out, how many engagements they're making through comments, etc. Track it and then see what result that is bringing. The best thing you can do is measure it via a CRM, and hopefully most CRMs are fully customizable, where you can add in sections to say, okay, this opportunity came from tick box LinkedIn. Okay, can we measure, can we import messages? Can we copy and paste messages in? Can we date stamp when conversations have been had? There are things you can do which then hopefully can be brought out as analytical data at the end of it that they can then monitor. Best thing to do is to find your feet that way. We were just talking about time in terms of how much time you spend on it. One of the easiest things that I do, and again, this is exclusive to iPhones, I assume Samsung would have an equivalent where it shows you how much time you're spending on your phone. There must be software out there that allows you to do that through your laptop as well. But I was just looking because I was quite curious. I don't measure this massively myself, but I was looking at how much time I spend on LinkedIn, and my daily average at the moment is 44 minutes exactly. So that is good from my perspective. Probably a lot lower than I thought I'd be spending. I spend the majority of my time on my phone on LinkedIn. I often sometimes jump in on the desktop for minimal activities. But that's another good place. So I can look at that and say, right, okay, I spend on average 44 minutes a day on LinkedIn. I can then go and look in at the revenue generated, the opportunities coming in, and that gives me a good indication. So there's a few places to start. Nothing's seamless at the moment, but it's worth the effort in the long term.
If you do a lot of your work at a computer, laptop, desktop, you can use not affiliated with them at all. I've used them in the past for tracking my own activity to see how much time I'm wasting. Rescue Time. They've got a free product. It will tell you that you're on a browser. You can program it, or not program it, you can click a few buttons to tell it to track specific URLs. And LinkedIn, because this is what data I pulled from, this is years ago when I did this, LinkedIn has quite a static URL system or web address, because if it's .app.linkedin at 1 minute and then .something.linkedin at the other, it can all get a bit messy. But LinkedIn's pretty static for one reason or another, so it tracks it relatively well with Rescue Time. Daniel, out of interest, what is your daily screen time average on your phone? I've just pulled mine up now. Mine is 46 minutes total, which is actually quite surprising to me.
46 minutes total per day?
Of all screen time on my iPhone.
So my screen time is 2 hours a day. It's a little bit higher.
It just means I probably spend more time on a laptop than on my phone. But I did this experiment with my dad the other day. We were back home for an occasion or another, all safely sat outside, COVID ready and COVID appropriate. And my dad has took the piss out of all of us. All of us kids have been on our phones for like hours a day. And his screen time was about 2 hours a day. Whereas again, mine was like 45 minutes. So he just got some stick from all of us for that. He's a massive fan of Liverpool Football Club. And so he just sits looking at the match results and all that kind of nonsense. So yeah, that's totally enough to do with social selling, but it might be interesting for the audience. And if you haven't looked at your screen time on your mobile device, it might be a shock to you of how much time you are potentially spending productively, or how much time you're wasting on different platforms, social medias, and so that might be useful for you. Okay, so with that said, then let's go down a bit of a rabbit hole here, Daniel. So there's no clear answers to this unless you tell me otherwise. If we were reporting data from our LinkedIn activity into a CRM, let's say I guess there's multiple questions here. What are we tracking? Are we tracking conversations? Are we tracking link clicks? If we're tracking link clicks or conversations, are these really sales qualified leads, or are these marketing qualified leads? How does all of this, because one conversation over social media is perhaps not the same as booking a meeting and having a call with someone more formally. So how do we track all of this? And does it need its own category because it's so different to what we traditionally would call a marketing qualified lead or a sales qualified lead?
It's a really good question. The whole MQL, SQL thing is an interesting one to tap into. I think that question only arises when you're gaining traction. So when you look at some of the SDRs, AEs that are building these good personal brands and reaching a lot of people, then absolutely marketing should be collaborating with that, creating trackable links and generating essentially MQLs, marketing qualified leads, which will be people that are obviously following those influencers, thought leaders, individuals, and potentially coming through as softer leads. From a sales qualified lead perspective, in my opinion, a sales qualified lead is someone that is, at that point of potentially booking a demo. They meet the ICP, you're building rapport, you're having conversations. These are strong leads, of which case the individual would be the person to sort of clarify that. And I've always been really strict with that. They have genuinely be good. I don't want to just qualify a lead to say, yeah, I've got a lead. Yeah, I'm having a conversation, where there's nothing or no context there. So be pretty strict on yourself with them. A sales qualified lead should be someone that you've genuinely qualified. They've come through some level of process. But a marketing qualified lead would be potentially someone just pinging you a message, not applicable to the product, but just wanting to talk to you. Maybe there's an interest there. Maybe they're engaging in your content, and that could be, counted as a marketing qualified lead. But that's, again, you're not going to get lots of those until you're really starting to gain traction in the earlier stages, probably the first potentially 6 to 12 months for most people. A lot of your conversations probably will be sales qualified because you are actively pursuing them, and they're going to be your ICP. You're starting those conversations, and usually there's a reason to, initiate that conversation. So most of the time it should be that. But for those that are gaining traction, getting momentum, getting engagement, then absolutely you will generate MQLs and work with your marketing department to help track them. Trackable links, one of the best ways to do it.
Sure. And what's your experience on this from a perspective of someone's own LinkedIn profile? Clear it's a gray area. The company doesn't own it. Well, you don't really own it either. LinkedIn owns everything that you put on there. I'm sure there's terms and conditions that the content that's created on there can be repurposed or whatever it is. It's not like a newspaper that you own, that you put in your own content within. You don't own that IP once it goes out onto the internet. So this is a bit of a gray area. Should salespeople, or how would you advise a salesperson who's perhaps got a little bit of traction? They've been doing this for 6 to 12 months now. They are closing deals, so their sales manager's happy that they're spending company time on this essentially project of building a little bit of a personal brand within their space, becoming known in their industry. How does a salesperson who's generating both sales qualified leads and perhaps a few marketing qualified leads as well, they have perhaps unqualified people coming into what is essentially their social selling funnel that need to go off to other places to come back to them later on as fully qualified? How does an individual, again, who's got this traction, who wants to make the most of it, how could they report it? How could they document it? How could they make sure that their sales managers and sales leaders know that they're generating all of this and they're doing it essentially on the side of their actual job, which is to perhaps close deals or book demos or whatever it is? How do they make sure that other people who are not working as hard as them, who are not doing all of this, how do they make sure that their manager knows that they're perhaps more valuable than just the schmuck who's sat there cold calling like a robot all day?
Biggest thing is to measure it. The proof is in the pudding. So you'll be able to see your own analytics. You'll be able to see the impressions you're making, the clicks you're getting, the engagements you're getting. But as I said, work with market, and it's a two-way street. Work with marketing so that they can give you things like trackable links, so they can also say, do you know what, this month you generated X amount of clicks to our website. We were able to track that. These converted into leads, which were distributed to the team. Again, the proof will be in the pudding, but it's beneficial for marketing to work with these individuals as well, because they're going to be having a huge impact on web traffic and inbound lead flow. And my biggest advice is look after your social stars, because they can open so many doors for you long term. And if you ignore them, or if you don't give them praise, or if you don't reward them, rightly so, for the business they're generating for the wider team, you'll lose them, because it won't take them long. If they continue getting traction, they can go out and get a better job. They could potentially set up their own business. Now, if you want to keep them, which I'd recommend you do, because there's a lot you can achieve as a business with them, then look after them, reward them, incentivize them, give them a bonus, give them additional responsibilities, give them a new title, empower them, because there's a lot more they can do for you if you work with them than if you ignore them and potentially run the risk of losing them long term. So yeah, get marketing to work together with sales anyway, but get them to work closely and capitalize on it, because it's a rare opportunity.
For sure. And it's not that you'll lose them because you're not making the effort. You'll lose them because do you know John Barrows, sales trainer? He's snapping these individuals up. Morgan Ingram, for example. Morgan Ingram creating his own SDR training content. John goes, hey, you're with me now, bro. And they're doing sales training and creating content together. So you're not just competing with, oh, this person's an SDR, they're making calls, they're training the team. I think Morgan had got into some management roles on the back of that as well. You're now competing with, hey, John wants to build a little like media company, similar to what I'm doing. If I could hire or kind of buy influence and collaborating with people like yourself, Daniel, you're competing with people who understand the game that's going on behind the scenes and understand the value of having an audience. And so you're not just competing with someone in an SDR role, you're competing with other marketers, influencers, and brand builders in the background as well. So something came to mind here as you were describing that, Daniel. I think this might be a valuable resource that perhaps we won't do at this moment, but we could perhaps create in the future I feel like the audience, if you are putting the efforts into this, especially if you're doing it out of hours as well, right? You're putting your own sweat equity into building perhaps what could be a little side hustle in the future. Maybe we should build some kind of documents that you send to your sales manager once a month. We'll build it out. You guys fill it in of lead generated, click generated, conversations generated, whatever it is. And so we'll format it all nice. And if I was a sales manager and someone sent me just a PDF once a month, no conversation, no pestering, nothing, no ask from their side. But they send me this document to say, I've done this, this, and this. This is what we've generated on top of the usual admin that salespeople have to do. I think that would then separate that individual from everyone else in the team. And that would be something that would, again, set an individual up for promotions, bonuses, and whatever it is to get that person to stay in the organization.
I think it's a genius idea, Will. I think it would take 5-10 minutes of work from the individual to input that data. And I know we live in this age where everything's integrated and we want things to be as seamless as possible, but some things are still going to have to be manually done. I would definitely say it's going to be worth it for the individual because it will help you see what you're actually generating from the work you're putting in. And it is going to be a valuable thing for your sales leader if you can then convert that into just some basic numbers, maybe some charts, whatever it may be, and say, look, this is what I'm doing, this is what the outcome is. Then that's going to speak their language as well, whilst they're going to still be learning the value and the outcomes that social can generate. I think it's a great idea. We should definitely build it.
For sure. I just love this idea. It's what we're doing over at salesman.org as well. This idea of just documenting and showing growth over time has real value because you can't. I feel like I don't want to go off on too much of a rant. There's a lot of BS in the sales industry, sales training industry. We've covered it with fake gurus and stuff on this show in the past. But you can't fake numbers, and you can't fake if you've got 12 of these documents over the past 12 months. It's very difficult for someone to turn around and say, well, hey, you got a lucky break, or this just happened for you. You can say, well, I started off with 0. For 2 months, no one gave a shit about anything I was doing. 6 months in, 12 months in, this started happening. So I think there's real value in that in this changing marketplace that we live in.
No, I totally agree. You can't lie with the numbers, and the results, speak their own truths. So yeah, if you can document that 100%, and something like that would help because at the moment it isn't very easy to document it or make it very clear. So we should definitely work on something like that, and hopefully for the audience, we'll have something that they can utilize. In the meantime, don't sit and wait for something like this. Do measure it yourself. Do build a quick spreadsheet. Do create a framed Word document, whatever it may be, and start tracking your growth today. Track what is your SSI score today. Track how many followers do you have, how many connections do you have. Start to measure these things and just follow that growth yourself, because it will help you see the growth, not just from some of the basic numbers that you can see directly on LinkedIn. So yeah, from today, start tracking it, and hopefully in the very near future there will be maybe some tools and platforms that will help make that a lot easier and a lot more visual.
For sure. Daniel, anything else to add to this idea of tracking our social media, both content growth, audience growth, and also the revenue numbers? Anything else you want to add to it, mate?
No, just make sure you're very clear on the difference between the sort of behind the scenes metrics and then the frontline metrics. So use things like SSI, use your follower count, use the engagement, your sort of measurements of personal brand. That's the behind the scenes stuff. That's the fluffy stuff. But then also be realistic about the outcomes that are coming out of it. We have the same 24 hours each, Will. So make sure you're measuring the outcome. The sales, the revenue, the leads, the pipeline, the opportunities, the conversations, the tangible conversations. And as you say, the sales qualified leads. Make sure that's where you put more weight. Yes, the fluffy stuff is nice, but it means nothing if you're not getting anything tangible from it. So be honest and realistic with yourself.
For sure. And I think it was Peter F. Drucker who said what gets measured gets managed, or something along those lines. And I find that for myself as well. If I've got in the office behind us, I've got a massive whiteboard with YouTube metrics, some revenue metrics, different things. And if I just look at it once a week, it doesn't necessarily mean it's going to go up or down, but it means that I have that focus, and then whether it's subconscious or not, I'll then focus on trying to shift it one way or another. I think it's very easy just to go, right, I'm going to post a piece of content every single day. As we described in multiple episodes of the Social Selling Show on here, Daniel. And then if we don't track the results, we don't know whether what we're doing is working. And it's very easy to just get in this routine of just daily content, posting this, posting that. And then 6 months later, you've spent a ton of time and you don't really know if it's made any difference. So just tracking a few metrics every week in a simple spreadsheet, or hopefully what we can create in the not too distant future, and we'll put it up over at socialsellingshow.com in the show notes on these episodes, or on the homepage. Just that quick document to just track things. Again, I don't know if it's your subconscious, it's thinking about it because you're constantly monitoring it, or what it is. But as soon as you start to measure something, you tend to nudge it one way or another. So that's my piece of advice on that. And with that, we'll wrap things up there. That was the Social Selling Show. That was Daniel Disney, the king of social selling. My name is Will Barron, founder of salesman.org, and we'll speak with you again on next week's Social Selling Show.